Well, hi folks, and welcome to episode 186 of Retro Power Uncut. And the weather's warmed up a bit. I've not got a jumper on, not got my hoodie on for the first time in a long time, which is nice. And yeah, we're going to start under an Interceptor this week. Got my nice Retro Power mug. Just did a bit of merch showing. Got my mug of tea. And yeah, we are underneath an Interceptor. Stu has been working on the rear end again this week and is making good progress actually. We've had a couple of ups and downs earlier in the week. The parts that Cal had ordered from Heights for revising back to the original design of rear brakes on this car have arrived, and Stu has now got them in place. There has been a little bit of metal trauma involved in that we've had to do some surgery to the body shell in order to get those brakes in place. You won't really get it on camera very well. It's very roughly chopped out at the moment, but in order to get the handbrake calipers, the little spot mechanical calipers for the handbrake mechanisms on the inboard brake discs in place, we've had to chop out a little bit of the body shell. But that's so be it, we've done that. We'll deal with that properly when the rear subframe's dropped out of the way. Stu's going to mark out the exact cut lines. Now he's roughly cut it out and physically got able to bolt the calipers in place. He's going to mark it all out properly so that then once this rear end's dropped out of the way, he can then do the fabrication neatly without everything making difficulties there. So he's got the spot mechanical calipers in place. He's also got the main rear brake calipers in place. There's room for those. We are going to put some cutouts in the fuel tank, some sort of shape in the bottom front corner of the fuel tank to make it easier to change the pads. So at the moment you would have to take the calipers off to change the pads. And taking the calipers off is going to be quite fiddly when everything's in situ. It will be possible, but I don't think the person doing the pad change would thank us for it. So that's we're going to do a little revision on the fuel tank and put two little pockets in the back of the tank just to make the access a little bit easier for changing the brake pads. So that's, again, that's something for the future. That's the tank isn't designed yet. I noticed in the comments, actually, I'm going to try and pick up a couple of comments in there as I go, and also we'll have a look at a few comments at the end of my little bit of the video. But one of the comments, I wasn't sure whether to take it seriously, but then by a comment further down, I almost did. I noticed a comment about the wooden fuel tank. Needless to say, the wooden fuel tank is not the final tank. We did make a quip about that, but yes, it won't be the final tank. And I did particularly like the comment about, well, we could have used newspaper, which I particularly liked. But yes, needless to say, the wooden tank is a temporary mock-up tank just to enable us to do design tweaks as we go. Just as well, because one of the things we found is that we need to do a design tweak to enable us to easily fit and remove the rear brake pads. So that's all good. We're waiting for another little part from Heights that they didn't have at the time that they're sending on to follow, which is the rear disc bells. Once we've got those, we can fit the bells and we can do all the final work on making sure everything fits properly there. Stu's currently working on the handbrake cable routing. Literally today was about 5 minutes ago working on the handbrake cable routing. The cables have got to come down from the calipers, down, around, and then come to an equaliser link off the front of this e-stop unit, the electric linear actuator that operates the electrically operated handbrake. And in order to do that, we've got to put a couple of brackets in here. One of the cables is going to have to go pretty close to the exhaust. We haven't got a lot of choice on that, but we're going to heat sleeve it thoroughly so that it hopefully doesn't cause the cable to seize up. That will be one of the little areas on the test and development sheet, because we're a bit limited in options otherwise. So we should be okay with enough heat resistant covering around that cable. I don't think it'll be a problem. But it's one of those things we may have to revise it, but I can't see that there's not a lot of other options of places we can put that cable, so we're going to have to live with it, I think. He's also just had a quick look at the prop shaft. We've got this bit like the wooden fuel tank, really. We've got a nice mop handle prop shaft in there at the moment. That's actually awaiting me to do something. We were pondering between single and two-piece prop. I normally default to a two-piece prop. Actually, it's so short, the prop on this car, that I think by the time we've got the UJs in, we're probably going to go single piece, but I need to just check on the front joint. At the moment, this transmission, the 8HP transmission that's in here, has a CV joint output. It's got a 6-bolt flange for a CV joint output, and I don't think we're going to be using a CV joint output, so I just need to check what the shape of the front UJ that would replace that is, just to see what offset that puts on the prop, and basically what tube length we end up, what joint to joint length we end up with on the prop, just to do check the calculations for prop lengths and check that we're well within spec. But it's going to be a pretty big diameter prop on this, so I don't think there'll be any RPM problems. We're not going to particularly high RPM engine, so we're not going to run into length limitations on the prop. So actually, I think we're probably going to end up with a single piece. Lots of waffle, but I'm going to do a little aside. Here we go off on a tangent, and that tangent, I think I've mentioned this before. A lot of cars, custom-built cars, have prop shafts which are incorrectly specified. And I'm amazed that more people don't run into problems with them, although somebody I know, a Facebook friend of mine, did actually have a prop failure fairly recently for this exact reason. Prop shafts have I'm probably preaching to a lot of people that already know a lot about this, because I'm aware that a lot of our followers, a lot of our YouTube audience are quite educated and quite aware of a lot of design implications of things on cars. On vehicles in general, but a prop shaft, one of the key forces that obviously a prop shaft is subject to torsion. The primary force that's imparted into a prop shaft is torsion. However, one of the primary forces induced in a prop shaft is whipping, is that the centre of the prop will bend off its centre line, and then the centrifugal effect, the rotational force that's being applied to the prop will cause it to go off its centre line. When it goes off its centre line, it then imparts a force on itself, which causes it to go further off the centre line, and it's an increasing force. Actually, I believe it will be an exponentially increasing force as it deviates further from centre line, and that's one of the key problems you get with prop shafts. If you do a very long, thin prop shaft, it will tend to bend, and let's call it the skipping rope effect. It will tend to go off its centre line, whip and whip and whip, and then eventually fold itself in half and fail dramatically. Very bad thing. Really don't want that to happen. So there is a design limitation on the length of a prop for a given diameter, and we regularly run into that. And an interesting example I can give is that Mark 1 and Mark 2 Escorts, which use a single piece prop shaft for rallying. Most of those, if running a BDA or a BDG, a BD engine, i.e. a high revving engine, most of those prop shafts are actually beyond their design limitations and technically should be running a two-piece prop shaft. GKN's spec for a prop on an Escort, on a 3-inch diameter prop, which is about as big as a prop as you will get in the car, on a normal wheelbase Mark 1 or Mark 2 Escort with a BD engine mounted in the normal forward position, that prop shaft will be outside the GKN design limits. And in an Escort running a BDA or a BDG, where you're seeing 9,000 prop RPM, which is quite common, you are well outside the prop spec, and you will be inducing skipping roping in that prop, and it is actually quite close to its failure point. So just an interesting aside. That's why we've used two-piece props on our Escorts that we've built, because we can see nine. In fact, I won't jump the video ahead here, but I won't spoil any of the video to come. But you will be seeing an Escort seeing 9,000 prop RPM. So you have to be aware that you don't want that to fail at that. So anyway, all an aside there, but that's why we're quite careful about specifying prop shafts. However, on this, we're not seeing that many engine RPM, so we won't be seeing that many prop RPM because we're not overdriving the prop to that extent from the engine. We're not stepping up from the engine RPM by that great a degree, and it's quite a short prop. It will be under a metre long joint to joint, and we'll be running, I would say, a 3.5-inch diameter prop shaft, possibly even larger, but certainly a 3.5-inch diameter prop shaft. So I don't think there'll be any problems in terms of whipping, but we will do the check and make sure. So I think this will be a single-piece prop. Anyway, lots of waffle there. That's all done. So Stu's getting pretty close now with all of the rear end. I think middle of next week we should be dropping the rear subframe out and getting the final bits of the fabrication finished around the rear end, finalising the fuel tank design, And then the other area, of course, was the rear tailgate, which we dropped on. And I'd seen lots and lots of comments about the tailgate saying, well, it relies on the glass for stiffness. Yes, we know it relies on the glass for stiffness. And I'd seen lots of comments about adding things to brace it and all this temporarily and adding weights to simulate the weight of the glass and all sorts of things like that. We don't need to do that. We have fitted the glass. We've fitted and unfitted the glass a number of times, but the glass has been fitted to the tailgate and it is still nowhere near rigid enough. Yes, the glass does impart some strength, most of the strength to the tailgate, but not enough strength to cause it to resist the forces that are imparted by the opening mechanism. However, we think we're almost there. We're finding a balance now. We've reduced the opening mechanism force a bit. There's a suspicion that may not have been correct because the mounting points of that have been restored on this car. They've been remade. And it could be that they're a few millimetres different to where they were originally. We don't know because I don't have an example of where they were originally. And to be honest, knowing Jensen, plus minus 1 inch was probably about as good as the tolerances got on the work from Jensen anyway, because they were pretty hopeless in terms of tolerances. But it's possible that there was too much force being imparted. I don't know. We've reduced that because we can wind the pressure off on the springs, so we've done that. Stu has also made some revisions around the hinges, reshaped the hinges slightly to make them put less force into the tailgate to start with. He's changed the shims that we had around there and done general fettling and fiddling around to basically take some of the pressure off the tailgate that the hinges are actually imparting onto it. And the next step is we're actually going to slightly narrow the tailgate. We're actually going to take a section out of the parcel shelf support that goes across the tailgate, cut that out and narrow it. The tailgate's been restored elsewhere, and we're wondering whether a slight bit of width creep has occurred. So although under no pressure it sits at the correct width, once the spring pressure is applied, it widens it slightly. Well, it bends it slightly, it doesn't widen it, but it bends it slightly. We're thinking if we kind of preload that by narrowing it very slightly, that will take some of that problem away. So we're actually going to take about 4 millimetres out of the parcel shelf support to pull some tension into inward tension into the tailgate. Going to reshape the top corners outboard of the top hinges very slightly because I think they've become bent by the action of the mechanism over the years. And we've decreased the pressure on the mechanism so that you do have to manually open the tailgate slightly. You have to add more manual force to open the tailgate, but we can live with that. And with those three things, we think we're pretty much there in getting that to be all the correct shape when it's open and when it's closed and keep all the body lines nice. But it's been, as you can appreciate, it takes quite a long time to do all that. And there's not really a quick way around it. There is no quick solution. It's just lots of head scratching, careful working out, evaluating the problem, finding solutions to the problem, effecting them and retrying. And that takes time, but we're making good progress. Things are coming along well. Moving on from that, we're not going to talk about the Audi this week. There is going to be a pause on the Audi project at the owner's behest. Some personal circumstances have occurred and we can't currently continue with that project. So that will be moving into storage for a short while, hopefully a short while. And we will then be moving on to the Jaguar XJC project. So that'll be all changed next week. But moving on from that, we have Allegro, technically number 2, but it's the number 1 car that's going to be leaving here because of the order of events and the way things have gone. Allegro number 2 project is about to go into the body shop. There's just a very final little bits of work been going on that. So Matt has been doing a little bit of work on the inner quarter panel tops. These cars, the later ones, and certainly this particular model, had trim panels that went over those areas, and they got little bits of dents and damage on. I don't know whether that was from factory or whether we've put those dents and damage in, or whether they were done before the car came to us or what. They were originally covered up by trim panels. They're now not going to be. We're having the painted strip at the top of the door and the top of the quarter guard, so they needed to be dent-free. So Matt's been carefully taking out some dents in those and in the door tops, so that they require minimal body work in terms of prep for paint. And Bobby wisely remembered that we had forgotten to put towing points on the Allegros. Day before yesterday, I think, remembered that we had not put towing points onto these. So he's been making up the threaded tubes and the saddles to mount those threaded tubes onto the chassis rails, front and rear. so that we can screw in towing VW type, the M16, I think they are, M16 by 2.5 thread VW type towing eyes, so we can screw them in front and rear, and been doing that on both cars, so that we've got towing points on there. There's a few little things to finish off. We need to trial fit the rear quarter glasses, but we're awaiting some seals for those. But that can be done, we would rather do that after the polyester coats have been done on the body shell, just so that any build on this bottom face is already there at the point we do that. We need to do a final check of the front and rear screens, but again, we're waiting for the seals on those. But again, we'd want to do that after polyester coat's gone on anyway. And we need to finalise the design and do a 3D print for the funnel for the filler neck, so that we can actually drill the hole and the mounting holes into this recess. But again, it's not critical that that's done prior to starting the body prep, so that's not really a problem area. And I believe George is probably getting towards finalising the CAD for the other parts, but we'll leave that to Cal and his visit to the CAD den this week to find out where we're at on that. But yeah, basically by the end, we're currently Thursday as usual. I would say tomorrow this will be ready to go into the body shop. It won't go into the body shop tomorrow because of what's going on in there, but again, I'll leave Mark to fill in on that. But as soon as Mark and and Gaz and Steve are wrapped up with what they're doing, then this Allegro will go into the body shop, and then it will be followed fairly closely by the second car as well. So on that note, we'll go over to the second car. Walk past various other things. Very soon we'll be picking up further work on the E-Type. To those who are wanting to see things move on that, as we covered last week, the book is now done, so we're pretty much into getting onto the rear body section, which we'll keep you updated on. And Bobby's going to be carrying on with some of the engineering type metalwork jobs on this car, which was revolving around the doors, which you'll have probably forgotten about, so it'll be quite nice to get back into that. But I think Bobby's probably looking forward to getting back into that. It'll be quite different to doing carbon panel fit up for a while, getting back into some mechanical engineering, so that's all good. On this car, Tom's just finalising the metalwork around the inner arch tubs. Just doing the little various bits of finishing off work around those, getting these little rear corners of the boot floor sorted, and getting the rear valance fitted, aligned, everything in place there. It's getting extremely close to being ready to go. Matt's working on the bumpers. He's pretty much got the front bumper all cut apart, pieced back together, welded back together and shaped to fit the car. And there's lots of little bits, little small tasks going on right, left and centre, which I will undoubtedly have forgotten a large number of. But there's all of the little finishing off jobs just to get this finally ready for blasting. And the rear valance, I was mentioning that, the rear valance is back on now. There'll be probably some final lead work possibly on that, although it's pretty close. And then the towing eye has still got to go into this, as well as the towing eye got to go into the rear valance on this car as well, which I think Bobby's going to get on to once he's finished stripping the other Allegro down. He'll be getting on with fitting the towing eye. He can't fit the towing eye on this one until we've got the valance fitted to the car. So that's what Tom's been working on. So yeah, everything's working along in parallel quite well. There's a lot of pairs of hands working, and everything's coming together pretty well. The plan was to get this in for blasting tomorrow. I suspect that's going to run actually into more like being Monday. But yes, in the next few days, sorry, Tuesday, because it's bank holiday on Monday, but in the next few days, this will be running in for media blast and zinc metal spray. Once that's done, we'll epoxy prime it, get it back on here, put it onto the jig again, and get the carbon panels all bonded on, and then do all the final fit up, do the mock-up build, put the running gear onto it, get it rolling, same as the other car is. At that point, ready to strip down, final check over, also into the body shop. So it'll be two Allegros running in tandem in the body shop, which will be quite cool to see. And yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at in terms of in terms of metal shop. I don't think I've overlooked anything. What we will do is, actually no, at this point I'm going to hand over to Mark and let him run through what's been going on body shop wise, because again there's been various things going on, primarily Churchill I think, but I'll hand over to Mark and let him appraise you of what's been going on in there.
Alright viewers, got some more stuff for Churchill to paint. Got the spare wheel goes in the boot. We're going to do that body colour just so it's a nice showpiece, might as well, while I've got it in the gun. I've wrapped these on the other side, so you can see that inside the wheel wells in the front arches. So these have got to be body colour because you see them from the engine bay. And here we've got it's not a 2JZ, it's unfortunately a Jag straight 6, but it would have been nice to have a 2JZ in it, wouldn't it? Big turbo. But yeah, that's going to be body colour. That's going to look nice sitting with the aluminium down here, freshly done. Engine bay should sit nice in there. So yeah, going to get the guns loaded up, smash some colour on, let that flash off, a couple more coats, drop coat it. I am going to do 2 coats of lacquer. I know people saying, oh, please put 3 on it, but the data sheet says 2. And technically we do 2.5 because I'll do my grip coat, which is half a coat, and smash 2 on it. I'm not going to go against the regulations of what Max Mayer say because it's there for a reason. And with the guns we use, it's more heavier build. So yeah, thanks for the advice, but I'm not ready to push it that far. I'm going to stick to what the data sheet says. And yeah, so this week we're wet flat in Churchill, as you can see. Gaz is still here, by the way, look, for his stalker. He's here. He hasn't left. Not left. We've got him back out the cupboard. He's been a grumpy old git. So yeah, he's back, working away.
He's got a stalker?
Yeah, he's got a stalker. Where's Gaz gone? I've not seen him in the last few videos. We're only joking, viewers. We know you love him. It's nice to see him back. But he's been Area 51, like I said last week, doing another project. What's that, to have a bit of a media blackout, but we'll probably see it one day. Yeah, Steve's working away back here, look.
Hi,
Come on, Steve, say hello.
Hi, viewers.
He's very shy, but when he's like behind the camera, mouthy. But yeah, so we're going to get this wet flatted, like I said, start 1500, then onto the 2000, and then probably get some 3000 discs as well, give it a bit over that. So yeah, hopefully by Monday, Tuesday, this will be all buffed. Also, I've done the rocker cover and the spare wheel, which James got footage of, you'll see in the booth. I've done the plates for the inner wheel arches, painted the hinges, directed other various things. So that's it this week. And tomorrow I'm probably doing some blasting. I've got to blast the Allegro if it's done in time. So I'll be off this, onto that. So that's it, yeah. See you next week.
So thank you, Mark. And I think what I'm going to do now is answer a couple of questions. I think I've picked up a few of the questions I was going to answer on our journey around the workshop, but let me look, because I just photoed a few of the questions. I've just taken screenshots of them so I don't have to scroll all the way through on YouTube. One of them from John Reed 3576 2 days ago was, I have a question. How do you manage doing the jobs with then stopping doing jobs to video doing the jobs? The content is amazing as ever. Thank you very much. How do you know what to film and when to just crack on and get it done? Well, that comes over to Jamie, who is currently holding the camera. He basically walks around and tries his best to capture everything that looks vaguely important on camera. Most of the time he does a very good job. The comedy side to that is that what he generally does is manage to pick the moment that something's gone drastically wrong that we're trying to do. Usually a fabricator, I speak from experience here, and it's usually when you've just done a really poor bit of welding on something that you think, oh crap, I'm going to have to cut that back out because I've made a mess of that. Jamie's right in there with the camera. But no, actually, Jamie is very good at getting all the way around the workshop and generally managing to cover most of the important things most of the time, which is quite tricky because there's quite a number of people here, as you'll appreciate. Keeping on top of everything that everybody's doing all the time is quite challenging. So yes, primarily it's Jamie going around trying to capture things. Secondary to that is when somebody's doing something that they think, this really ought to be on camera, they'll run into the office and collar Jamie if he's not in the workshop, he's in the office. Somebody will run and grab him and say, right, I've got a bit, you probably want to be videoing this. And then thirdly, we're trying to get in place various other cameras, and to that end you'll have picked up that we've been doing some time-lapse stuff. That's been time-lapse via GoPro. However, GoPros are not very good for doing time-lapse, if I'm honest, unless somebody will appraise me of some new invention, but certainly so far to us GoPros aren't great for doing time-lapse, because really to do time-lapse on them you need them to be connected to a permanent power supply. That doesn't lend itself to the type of work we're doing, because inevitably we're needing to move around doing little bits of time-lapse all over the place. We really need a battery-powered time-lapse, so we're actually looking at getting a probably Brino time-lapse camera that we can put up on a mag mount around the workshop. Currently we're mag mounting the GoPro in various places, but we're looking to try and mag mount a Brino so that we can put that up around the workshop in various places and get more of the time-lapse, because I personally think, I'd be interested in people's comments, but certainly the channels I watch on YouTube, I really appreciate that there's a lot of time-lapse content, and I think that really brings something to the channel, and we're trying to do more of that. This week hasn't been great for that. We haven't had that much work that lends itself to time-lapse really, but we're going to try and, as we do have that, we will try and get more and more of that, and try and do some step-by-step stuff as well where we can. That is quite tricky. Anyway, that's the first one. Coming back out of there, I think there was a couple of questions. Yeah, there's a couple of questions about the Jensen glass. I've already covered that one. We don't really need to go into that. The next one, I've got two shots on this screen. One from Keith Farrell, 3370. Rick Wood always has cool cars parked outside his business. Thoroughly nice chap as well. No new old fab machines in this week. Rick does have all sorts of fascinating stuff around his workshop. His workshop is a pretty crazy place. If anybody's not been past there, it's mind-boggling. The only way I can describe it, Rick Wood's workshop, is mind-boggling. He certainly doesn't have an easy time operating from his workshop, that's for sure. He really could do with a bigger workshop. But it is very, very impressive. He is a very clever chap, and he has unbelievable capabilities under that roof. It is quite an amazing place if you've not witnessed it. Yeah, and he is a thoroughly nice chap as well, as you say. No new old fab machines in this week. No new old fab machines. I have another new old fab machine, but you've already seen it, the guillotine with the terrible wiring. I'm not rushing to put the wiring into that because I don't really want it sat outside with the wiring all outside. I'm going to put the wiring into it when it's nearer being able to come into the building, which it isn't yet. So that's where that. And then somebody says, I guess the Essex V6 is for the Scimitar. Yes, but it's not an Essex V6. It's a GAA. So that's a by-the-by point. There's another question there. This was one of the other ones I wanted to cover. From Ben Buchanan 672. How much of your engineering decisions are based on calculations and how much on rule of thumb? And you have hit a very, very important, very relevant nail on the head there. It's quite a split between the two. And the rule of thumb comes from experience, and the calculations come from sound engineering practice. And there is a balance between the two, because if you have to calculate everything, it takes so long that no customer could afford to actually undertake the project. But if you do everything with rule of thumb, there's a great danger of having a serious mechanical failure. So there is a balance between the two. And I'm 46, so I've got a reasonable amount of, and I've had a life in engineering, and not all in cars, in industrial engineering and steel mills and all sorts of things. So not just cars. So I've got a fairly broad brush of engineering behind me. So my rule of thumb is reasonably accurate when it comes to forces and stresses on things. But I do tend to over-engineer, which I think is a good thing if we're trying to keep people alive. But equally, yes, I do need to reach for a calculator now and again. Certainly, as a case in point, doing the rear suspension on the Escorts, originally on Gordon Murray's car, I did do a fair few calculations around that, stress calculations. I then added a lot of safety margin into things, but I did do a fair few calculations around that. When it comes to highly stressed parts, I do calculations. When it comes to low stress parts, it's rule of thumb. That kind of goes for a lot of these things. There's a lot of rule of thumb where you know that a part is under no significant stress. It doesn't really matter too much. If you're designing something and you know that you are, we're not building racing cars here, there's the caveat. If you're building a racing car, you would want to make sure that all of the parts are under significant stress, otherwise you're carrying excess weight. Here, reality is, with largely road or toy vehicles, you're not designing down to the last gram, so you're not stressing the parts that highly. So a lot of it can be rule of thumb. So that's the answer really is, it's a balance, and it depends on the part, and it depends on the stress level, and it depends on what that part is doing as to how much calculation and how much rule of thumb there is. But it is all a balance, and you're quite right, there is quite a bit of both of those things involved. And was there one more? It's just a fuel tank one. A wooden petrol tank, is that not dangerous? And I like the 18 Rob Smith answer of so much better than a newspaper tank, wink. Indeed, it is better than a newspaper tank. But going back to picking up the comment about Rick Wood, the other thing I've realised I've failed to mention on the walk around the workshop, and very important to mention, is the Scimitar progress. Obviously, you may well have seen some of our CAD progress popping up on the social media feed. We're now at a stage where things are moving forward, but not in our workshop. I think I alluded to the fact that we were going to be using a different main chassis in principle under the Scimitar, and we are indeed. And I have been talking to Ian at Sport Motive in Stoke-on-Trent, who is a very good chap and very knowledgeable and does some very interesting work with TVRs. And he's been doing that for a long time, certainly over 20 years. I don't know exactly how long, but significantly more than 20 years. And he makes an upgraded chassis for, well, he makes various upgraded chassis for Griffith, Chimera, and onwards, all the way through to Cigaris TVRs. And a TVR chassis, in principle, the general layout of a TVR chassis lends itself well to sitting under a Scimitar-esque body. Because the car is quite narrow, you're quite limited in how much external strength structure that you can put under the Scimitar. And originally, the Scimitar basically used a backbone chassis, a central backbone chassis. It's not the same, but it's not unlike the principle of a Lotus Elan chassis, I guess, where the strength is all carried down the transmission tunnel. The Scimitar is not unlike that, except that it's a bit weedy because it's two pretty insignificant beams that carry all the load on the Scimitar. So to increase the stiffness on that, the main way of doing that would be to raise that central section. And that's exactly what a TVR chassis is. It's the same principle. It's a central backbone that carries all of the load. Admittedly, in torsion, it's not the stiffest structure in the world, but that chassis is a central backbone with a lattice structure that carries the front and rear suspension and ties all the car together. And that's exactly what we're going to use. And in doing various bits of modelling, various bits of measuring, and various bits of scanning and checking, a TVR chassis actually lends itself remarkably well to the job in all of the key dimensions other than wheelbase. So I've talked to Ian at Sport Motive, and he is actually going to build us a chassis that is lengthened by the amount that it needs to be lengthened by to give us the correct wheelbase for the Scimitar. But it is, to all design intents and principles, a TVR type chassis. However, it is one of Ian's Sport Motive's evolution type chassis, which has revised suspension geometry. It's similar to TVR Cigaris in terms of geometry, but not quite. It has higher roll centres than the original TVR chassis, which ran far too low a roll centre, particularly at the front, which meant the roll couple was quite high, heavy, large, which meant that the car actually rolled much more than it should have done. So the roll centres are revised. The wishbones are much nicer. They're tubular wishbones, not the pressed steel type wishbones, semi-fabricated, semi-pressed wishbones that the TVR used originally. These are much nicer tubular wishbone. Generally a lot of revisions in the chassis. You can read online all about that. If you go onto Sport Motive's website, you can read all about the Evolution chassis, and you can understand all of what work Ian has put into that, because it's quite significant to the amount of work. I picked up a comment a while back somewhere on social media, I think, about why would you use a TVR chassis if they're not very good. They are actually very good. They're for what they do. You know, every piece of automotive engineering is a compromise, and undoubtedly there is a compromise in TVR chassis in that torsionally it isn't amazingly stiff. No. However, is it torsionally stiff enough? Yes, more than torsionally stiff enough for the job as a road and toy car. On a track car, you would want to enhance that, but for a road and toy car, it's more than torsionally stiff enough, and it's massively more torsionally stiff than a Reliant Scimitar. It goes without saying. The benefits additionally to using that are that we can use a significant amount of the TVR stroke Sport Motive Evolution running gear. Now, Sport Motive have done billet front and rear uprights, which are very similar to TVR Cigaris. However, it's their billet version of them. We're going to be using those, and they're using BTR diff, BTR M80 diff, which is pretty strong, reliable. Parts are available, and it doesn't quite carry the weight penalty of some of the really big and heavy-duty diffs, and it will be more than strong enough for the GAA V6 that's going to be driving through it. And so things are all coming together quite well there. And then also in the background, we're working on transmission, and I've been looking at transmission ratios this week. Again, this isn't very photogenic, but I'll explain it anyway. We haven't really got any footage because it's just me sat at a computer on a spreadsheet doing gear ratio calculations. However, I've been working on the gear ratios. With Rick Wood's advice and a bit of working through the various options, we're using a ZF S5 18.3 transmission, which is a pretty commonly used transmission. They're very strong, much stronger than their original design torque limit, so they're plenty strong enough to use with the GAA. Rick uses them on the Capris, which race for up to 12 hours at a time, using that transmission with no problems at all. So good, reliable transmission, very strong, really nice gear shift. The key was getting the ratios right though, because the transmissions that are used in rally cars and racing cars are no good really for road use. First gear is far too high, and if anything, the fifth gear could be a little bit low. It's not ideal for cruising. So I've been doing a bit of work on that, and actually the Lotus Sunbeam, or Sunbeam Lotus, whether you want to be correct or not about it, used that transmission. Originally the road cars used that transmission. It's very strong, as I say, and in the Sunbeam Lotus it actually had quite a nice set of ratios. I've been talking to Martin Jones at Martin Jones Transmissions, who builds those gearboxes pretty much all day, every day, and he can supply an as new or new transmission with the Sunbeam Lotus ratios to us, and that's what we're going to be using now behind the GAA. Rick supplied us a bell housing to fit what's essentially the back of an Essex block to that ZF transmission, and then that will be driving a BTR M80 diff in the back of the TVR-esque Evolution version Sport Motive chassis, which we will be getting as just a bare backbone, because we're then going to be fabricating from there outwards the pickups for the bulkhead area and the doors and the other things, where we're going to actually be picking up a bit more of the body shell structure in the steelwork than Reliant did originally. They actually mounted all that into the fiberglass, but you'll have to see that evolve as we go. But yeah, things are sort of coming into place in the background, not really on camera because there's nothing to film here. I'll speak to Ian. We might go up to Sport Motive with a camera maybe at some point if he'd like us to do that. I need to speak to him, but if he'd like to, then we'll probably go up to Sport Motive with a camera as well, which would be quite good. And hopefully I'll have a chat to Rick, because I know Jamie would like to go up to Rick Wood as well and see, perhaps once the final engine is built, we might see if we can ask Rick if we can wave a camera around up at his place as well, because you'd probably like that. It's a fascinating place. On that note, I'm going to stop waffling on because I've done an enormous amount of that, and hand over to Cal. a delicious round stone coffee. Ah! Who the f***ing hell has put that in there? I hope you filmed that. Good. So you can't even put that bit in now. Just all of this in the name of wanting a delicious round stone coffee. Good Lord. Somebody's been doing that for ages because I can see all the ragged bits of spoon around the edge. Right. Oh, nearly pressed T then. That would have been a disaster. An absolute disaster. Right. Anyway, enough of this coffee making nonsense. Rolling Road. You just saw Project 1. And Alex undergoing his mapping session down at Roger Clark Motorsport. So, might give them a shout actually. Roger Clark Motorsport. You might know them for their gobstopper, as it's called, time attack impressors. Absolutely ridiculously cool sequence of cars they've built. There's Gobstopper 1, 2 and 3. They're kind of, 3 has done a couple of events for sure, shakedown. I think they're going to be starting to use that for some proper competition this year. Gobstopper 2 was just, they were all mind-blowing. Gobstopper 2 was ridiculously, probably the first time I'd seen a car that I thought was like next level motorsport build. There's some great footage from Festival of Speed from years gone by. I think they were fastest up the hill with that Impreza 2 years running, if I remember rightly. And then Gobstopper 3 is just on another level again. The power to weight ratio is astonishing for a four-wheel drive car, and I've got a feeling it's going to break a lot of records. So watch this space on that. But yes, we've been down at Roger Clark Motorsport. They've got a lovely rolling road set up, which in all honesty they don't use a vast amount outside of their own project mapping, so it's quite convenient for us. It's literally 5 minutes down the road. We can just go down there and have use of it, usually for a couple of days. So in this instance, Alex has been down there for 2 days, trying to get a good amount of miles on the car, kind of get as much of the groundwork in as possible, and then we'll carry on with some road mapping afterwards. But we're trying to get as much detail in the map as possible, so it's very easy to kind of set in the big number stuff and make the power you want to make, but it's kind of getting the refinement of mapping elsewhere, getting the fueling ignition right throughout. So all of the kind of instances when you're suddenly changing from one throttle opening to another, or just smoothly transitioning, and all those things like when you're pulling away in traffic and that sort of thing. Trying to refine it all. Obviously with it being fly-by-wire, there's kind of additional to do on that in terms of throttle pedal mapping, etc. But yes, the main thing is nothing broke, and that's always the sort of nervousness. This is the first time really the car's been driven anywhere. I drove it down to there, and that was the first time it's ever got driven on the road. Went pretty well. Certainly didn't have any major complaints about how it felt to drive. Felt really, really good actually, very responsive in terms of steering and feel, and the controls all feel nicely weighted. But yeah, no massive leaks. Nothing broke, no major drama. Only slight drama is we were running it on some Cooper, I think a medium compound tarmac rally tyres, which I thought would be okay on the rollers, and I was definitely wrong. The rear tyres overheated and started to break up quite spectacularly, so we switched to just running some Toyos on it for the minute, just to carry on with the rolling road session. But yeah, I think we've done about 270 miles on the rollers over the last couple of days. Alex seemed pretty positive about where he got to with the map. He's just going to spend some time going over all the data logging that we've done in the latter stages, so he can get his head around any further tweaks we might need to make, and then next week we'll probably be taking that out on the road, getting some road miles on it, so I can start to assess whether there's any niggles in terms of the way it feels to drive, and we can work through those. So exciting times, getting towards final handover on that. Okay, so moving on to the car behind me. Camaro. I think last week where we left off, I was just doing the peril of the glass fit, and it would have been the Thursday when we filmed it. I got the rear glass bonded in, pretty happy with how that one, got the mouldings in. And then the owner was coming over on the Saturday. I was desperate to have it looking a little bit smarter and more together. And I thought, I'll try and get the front windscreen in. So Saturday, I think it was probably Friday, I bonded it. Saturday, I put the trims in. That went well as well. Really happy. My sort of foam dam seal method worked really nicely. Gives a really nice finish. When you look down the bottom of the windscreen here, you can see the sort of grey foam that I'd used to do that. But you can't see any of the sealant, so it looks really tidy. So yeah, all went as obviously nerve-wracking and high jeopardy as this job and the rolling road session are, but it went well. The only thing I'm not entirely happy with is the way some of the mouldings fit. These stainless mouldings are aftermarket. Again, I mentioned last week, I wasn't 100% happy with how the rear fits. When on the front, not 100% happy with this gap on the corner. So I think what I might do is pull these back off and see if I can do a little bit of manipulation on them and just get them to fit slightly better. It's very difficult to trial fit because although we trial fitted all of this and they fitted at the metalwork stage, we trial fitted them all. But until you've got the exact depth of the windscreen, you don't quite know what angle this is going to sit at, and obviously because it's curved, the change of angle changes the curve at the side here. And I think the screen ended up fractionally higher than how it was when we offered it up at Metalwork, so I'll probably just manipulate that moulding slightly. And then Richard has been cracking on with interior stuff on this. So we weren't sure originally if we were going to hold fire on the door cards, but when the owner came over on Saturday, he said, "Oh, we've come this far, we might as well crack on and make a good job of those as well." So Richard's been carrying on with the kick panels, which he started last week. We're using the back part of the originals because they're plastic moulding and they've got a section which actually follows and caps off the door shut all the way up the front. But they've got a big vent hole in them and a bit where the slider used to go for the foot air vents, which have now been deleted, and there's speakers down there. So we're basically using the moulded part at the back so we don't have to make a complicated shape, and then just extending that with a flat ABS 3mm thick board at the front. Cut the speaker holes in. They're now going to be foamed. I think you'll be using probably 2mm Plastazote foam on there. They're going to be Alcantara. And then we've moved on to door cards. So we were sort of trying to come up with a pattern of materials that look nice, elevated a little bit above how it was originally, but not going absolutely crazy with complete new custom design components. What we decided to do was introduce a couple of flowing lines that sort of mimic almost the body shape, that flowing Coke bottle body shape of the car, and just sweep up the door, back, up a bit at the back and over to the parcel shelf. I just kind of sketched them out, and then we were like, well, we'll try that in the car, did a bit of fine line tape, got that until we're happy. Then Richard's interpreted that and sort of got it all geometrically correct and nice and flowing rather than having all the wobbles of me doing the fine line tape in there. Marked out where all the vertical pleats are going to be, so we're going to run with Alcantara at the top and bottom, and then the central stripe, if you like, is going to be the brown leather that we've got on the seats, and then we're going to do vertical pleats at the same spacing that they are on the seats, and that I think will come together and look pretty smart. And then we'll probably upholster the armrest, but use the original plastic armrest, but upholster it, do a little metal insert in there with our own logo perhaps on it, or the car's name as a logo on there. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to see all that come together. And yeah, that's actually, with that done, I think that's interior pretty much there. We've just got to fit the A-pillar covers, fully fit the dash, get those in there. And then I think we're pretty much down to wiring, and she'll be getting there. It's sort of crept up on me a bit, this one. Sometimes you get this with projects that you've had in for a long while, you sort of feel like you're miles away from completion for an awfully long time, and then suddenly it just comes together. What should we talk about? There's Project Kuma. So should we have a little careful sidle over here? And see what Gibbo has been up to on this. So a few avenues. He's just carrying on with the interior panel fit up. We showed he was doing the carpets the other week. We're in a position to get everything upholstered on this one now. So I just wanted to get all of the trim panels in, to check the fit for the final time, and then also to just mark out the stitch line on them. So there's a line that runs
horizontally down the door here and then flows onto the rear quarter panel and across the rear bulkhead panel. So we want to get all the panels in their final position so we can mark that line on and make sure that once it's stitched in the upholstery it flows nicely and isn't uneven between one panel and the next. So we've done that. He's fitted up these trim strips, so like a fabric insert on the final installation. So we've just trial fitted those, made sure they're all good. What we'll do on the final upholstery on here is that the foam will come down and be cut around that trim strip there. So the trim strip actually recesses into the leather that's over that foam. And then the strip itself is upholstered in a contrasting material, but it sits in kind of reasonably flush. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. We've got some glass in, which is always exciting to see. Door seals have gone in. He's just been doing the drilling the holes for the sill mouldings. Also trimming the sill carpet sections, because that's one thing. We needed the kick panels in to trim the carpet sill section to completely butt up with the back of that kick panel, because what we discovered when we were mocking those up is if you put them over the carpet there, it kind of kicks them out a bit far and creates a bit of a gap down the back. So we've actually cut the sill carpet exactly to butt up with it, and then we'll edge whip that so it finishes off nicely, but basically goes edge to edge with the kick panel. So yeah, looking pretty good on that. Looking forward to getting all that interior in progress, getting the rest of the glass in. Headlining's done for this now, so we can get the headlining in. And hopefully engine imminently with a bit of luck. What else? Land Cruiser. In fact, there's a couple of things. The CAD layer. I'm just trying to think what's been going on in the CAD den. So Luke has been on Allegro stuff, basically pushing forward all of the various design work he's done on the interior to actual manufacturable components, and so we can actually start getting those made. So he's been working quite a lot on the dash, just refining some of the fits. Now we've got Richard here. Richard and Luke have been able to review quite a lot of the structural design of the dash to assess how good it's going to be in terms of leatherability, shall we say. So which bits are going to be awkward to upholster, which bits aren't, and doing some tweaks accordingly. That's kind of the beauty of having the upholstery in-house, is that we can have that to and fro constantly. You know, and there's just a discussion needed every sort of couple of minutes, you can make sure all those discussions occur so that we can make sure the final leather goes in really nicely, everything works as it should, and everything comes together as intended. So yeah, that's basically what Luke's on with at the minute. And he's just done the trial panels for the door cards and the parcel shelf. We've got them all drawn out, ready to cut the final panels, but we wanted to just check the positions of all the mounting holes for the mounting clips, and also mark onto the door frame itself where the bolt holes are going to be, because we've got to put some rib nuts in which hold the armrests in. So we've done a template just in mild steel, plasmid out, offered that up on the car. All the clip positions were good, so we've just gone through with a Sharpie marker where all the bolt holes are going to be. So we can put those mounting points in at this stage, and similar on the parcel shelf, cut out just a mild steel blank just to check the shape of it, check the positions of the speakers, mark out the mounting point holes, and then we'll use that same CAD drawing, now we've verified that it's correct, to laser cut the final ABS panels for that. So that's all going well. And then George has been on with Allegro. So our Allegro design had a splitter and side skirts, which are going to be carbon parts that we're having custom made. But you probably noticed we never had that done at the point we did the quarters and wings, and that was because we wanted to get all of that stuff in place on the shelf first, in case there are any discrepancies in real life versus the CAD in terms of the width of the wings, or maybe the distance between the front wing and the quarter panel. Because what we didn't want to do is make the skirts and then offer that up and find that the quarter panel in real life had ended up a few mil longer or shorter, and it didn't quite match up. So our intention is to get the car to the stage the first one's at with everything bonded on, rescan it all, and then just tweak the design of those parts so they fit perfectly, which is what has been done on the front. So we've scanned the front of both of the cars now with the wings in place. Incredibly happy with how close they are from one car to the other. Literally like within, I'd say, certainly within a couple of mil, which given all of the discrepancies you even get in the original Austin parts is pretty damn good. So happy with that. He's now tweaking his final design of that front splitter, refining the shape of it slightly, so we can then pull the trigger on having that made, and then the skirts will follow shortly as well. So that's what's going on up there. And then actually if I move over here, Land Cruiser, I've just been working through the bits that I talked about last week. So Jim spec'd the stainless bolts to replace the ones that we accidentally fitted just in a natural zinc plate finish. So I think the door hinge ones are now in. I think the bonnet ones are in. Is there, Jim, are them bonnet latch bolts in as well now, or have they gone for Xylan? Okay, cool. So the bonnet and the door ones we're leaving as stainless steel because you can only see the very top of the head in the top of the hinge. The bonnet ones I think need to be black to be in keeping, so we're going to Xylan those even though they're stainless, but it will give it a black finish. Anthony spotted there was a very small oil weep on the speedo drive, so we're just going to have a look at why that is. Must be a faulty seal, I'm guessing. And then we've just been working through the fuel system, so we have got to the bottom of that. I mentioned before that for whatever reason the Venturi pump that's supposed to lift from the slave tank and fill the primary tank wasn't working as it should, may even have potentially got into a situation where it was pulling out of the primary tank and emptying into the slave tank. So we've done a bit of testing on that and we've resolved it by moving the Venturi pump. So we had the Venturi pump externally from the tank, quite near to the secondary tank. And our suspicion is that because there was a fairly long length of pipe after the Venturi pump in the sort of return feed to the primary tank, that was giving enough back pressure, if you like, that it was killing the Venturi effect. So what we've done is we've moved the Venturi pump to literally inside the primary tank, the last bit before the fuel returns to the tank. So where the return fuel connection comes into that now, there's a short pipe underneath the billet plate on the top of the tank, and then you've got the Venturi pump, and then literally straight out of the Venturi pump, the fuel just returns to the tank there. And then we've put an additional hole in the top plate so we can then do the siphon connection from the secondary tank, come straight across through a bulkhead fitting in the top and into the siphon connection on the Venturi pump. So essentially we've moved the pump to being internally on the tank and the very, very last thing in the return fuel feed, and done some testing with it with just a pot of fuel in there, and yes, it went from basically doing nothing to sucking 600 ml of fuel in probably, I don't know, 20 seconds or so. So huge improvement. So hopefully that will be that one solved, and that will pretty much conclude the bits and bobs we're going over on this. And I think that also pretty much concludes this week's video. So we shall see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Hello, this is God speaking. That is a mighty fine choice of motor car. But be prepared, it may surprise you with financial burden.
Funny you should say that. It's blown an intercooler hose on the way here, I think.